October 16, 1871. The banks of the Spokane River, Washington Territory. The air is cold, sharp with the scent of pine resin and falling water. Not the gentle murmur of a stream, but a deep, constant, thunderous roar, a sound so powerful it vibrates through the ground and into the bones. It is the sound of the Spokane Falls, a titanic, churning cascade of foam and primal force. On this day, the river is not just a geographic feature. It is the absolute center of a world. And on its banks, two men stand, their perspectives separated by an unspoken chasm. One is a Spokane tribal leader, his eyes reading the river's currents, its salmon runs, its spiritual cadence. The other is a white settler and former Army officer named James Nettle Glover, and he hears something else entirely. He doesn't just hear water falling. He hears wheels turning. He hears money. Glover had arrived just 2 years prior, purchasing a small claim from another settler for a handful of silver dollars and a team of horses. He saw what others, merely passing through on their way to the rumored gold fields elsewhere, had overlooked. The falls were not an obstacle. They were an engine. In a nation rapidly industrializing, this was pure, untapped horsepower. The Spokane people, the Espikne, had lived with this power for millennia, their seasonal rounds, their fishing platforms, their legends woven into its spray. The river provided everything. To Glover and the trickle of ambitious men joining him, it promised everything else. Sawmills to devour the endless forests, flour mills to grind the wheat from the yet unplowed prairies, and the railroads that would inevitably follow the scent of profit. The tension is not of dramatic confrontation on this autumn day, but of profound, parallel realities. In the Spokane villages, there is a deep gathering anxiety. The Treaty of 1858, negotiated in the aftermath of the Coeur d'Alene War, had shrunk their ancestral lands to a reservation north of the river. The world was closing in. The Sayapos, the white men, were no longer a distant rumor. They were here, measuring, marking, building crude log structures. They brought with them a different rhythm. The sharp bite of the saw, the permanent square lines of buildings, the concept of individual, fenced ownership of the land itself. Glover's tiny settlement, barely a dozen structures, is an island of this new order. It is a place of rough ambition. The tools are axes, crosscut saws, and surveyor's chains. The technology is that of extraction and transformation. Every fallen tree, every cleared plot is a declaration. The social fabric is taut and simple. A community of individualists bound by shared hardship and speculative hope. They are disconnected from the ancient social and spiritual fabric of the plateau tribes, a fabric still intact but fraying under the pressure of disease, diminished resources, and the relentless advance of the railroad surveys. The cultural clash is in the very silence between the two sounds, the eternal roar of the falls and the new, intermittent crack of timber. It is in the difference between a network of kinship with the land and a blueprint for dominion over it. The political reality hangs heavy. Washington Territory is a distant administrative concept, but federal power is implicit in every survey stake, every military scout that passes through. The Spokane leader understands treaties and boundaries. Glover and his compatriots think in terms of town sites and claims. Both know a precipice is approaching, not of war this time, but of an irreversible change. The river will decide the future, but who will command the river? The question hangs in the mist-filled air, as palpable as the coming winter chill. The story of Spokane is no longer just one of people and place, but of power and who gets to channel it. June 25, 1881. The Northern Pacific Railway construction camp west of the Spokane settlement. The dominant sound is no longer just the falls. It is a metallic symphony of chaos, the shriek of a steam whistle, the percussive clang of spike mauls on iron, the guttural shouts of foremen, and the groan of overburdened wagons. The air, once clean with pine and mist, is now thick with the acrid bite of coal smoke and freshly turned earth. 10 years have passed since Glover stood on the riverbank, and the prophecy of the railroad has become a physical, grinding reality. 1,000 transient workers, a tumultuous mix of European immigrants, Chinese laborers, and Civil War veterans, swarm like ants, laying the ribbons of steel that will bind this remote corner of the territory to the might of the continent. In the nascent town, a different kind of frenzy has taken hold. James Glover, no longer a lone speculator, but now Father Spokane, moves with the urgent energy of a man seeing his vision materialize at breakneck speed. He is surrounded by a new breed, town boosters, land speculators, and merchants like Frederick Post, who see not just a mill site but a metropolis. They gather in raw frame buildings, hunched over linen maps illuminated by kerosene lamps. Their tools are no longer axes but pens and printing presses, stamping out city plats with names like Spokane Falls and Spokane City on land only recently ceded by treaty. Every hammer blow echoing from the railroad grade sends a corresponding tremor through the price of a downtown lot. The human presence is now a flood. The settlers are no longer a handful of hardy souls, but clerks, lawyers, saloon keepers, and tradesmen. They demand not just shelter, but sidewalks, schools, and theaters. The social tension has morphed from a quiet clash of worlds into a volatile urban brew. The Spokane people, confined to their reservation to the north, are now spectral figures at the edges of this boom, occasionally seen in town trading for goods, their presence a silent reminder of the displaced past. Within the white community, divisions flare between the old settlers and the newly arrived boomers, between temperance leagues and the riotous saloons lining Front Street, between the law-abiding and the opportunistic drifters drawn by railroad money. The political landscape is crystallizing. Spokane Falls is incorporating, arguing over charters and mayors. The technology that defines this era is the steam engine and the telegraph, collapsing distance and time. The railroad isn't just coming, it is the race in derter. The entire economy is a speculative bubble inflated by the promise of its arrival, but the land itself pushes back. The rocky terrain challenges the engineers, requiring trestles and cuts. Fire, the eternal urban scourge of wooden cities, already licks at the edges, destroying blocks that are rebuilt within weeks, higher and more densely. And then on this late June day, the sound changes again. A new rhythmic pounding joins the chaos. From the west, a distant plume of black smoke grows larger. Then it appears, a giant, gleaming black locomotive, its diamond stack belching cinders, its wheels taller than a man. It rolls slowly, ceremoniously onto the newly completed track at the edge of town. A crowd erupts, cheers, gunshots into the air, the ringing of the new church bell. The iron horse has arrived. But for the savvy few like Glover, the moment of triumph is instantly replaced by a new, more urgent calculation. The railroad's terminus, the source of its wealth, is not fixed. It could bypass them. Rival townships are scheming, offering bonuses. The turning point is here, but it is precarious. City has been born from the river's power, but its future now depends entirely on the whims of Eastern Railroad magnates like Henry Villard. The community holds its collective breath, celebrating the engine on their tracks, while their leaders board it to head east, not as victors, but as supplicants armed with cash and promises to secure the city's fate in the paneled offices of New York and St. Paul. August 4th, 1889. Downtown Spokane Falls, Washington. 6:03 p.m. The air is not just hot. It is a furnace blast, dry and oppressive, sucking the moisture from the wooden shingles of every shop, hotel, and saloon. The sun, a furious orange orb, dips toward the horizon, but it provides no relief. For months, the Pacific Northwest has baked under a drought of historic severity. The Spokane River runs lower, revealing ugly, scarred rock. The new city, proud, chaotic, built almost entirely of timber, is a tinderbox waiting for a spark. That spark comes not from the falls, but from a small restaurant kitchen on Railroad Avenue. A grease fire, a panicked attempt to extinguish it, a gust of wind through an open window. In minutes, a single flame becomes a wall of fire, racing with a terrifying, living hunger down the tight, planked alleyways. This is the climax, not of human conflict, but of elemental fury against human ambition. The sensory detail is overwhelming. The deafening roar of the inferno, louder than any train or waterfall. The sickly sweet smell of burning pine resin. The blistering heat that warps glass blocks away. The constant, raining hail of glowing embers carried on the devil's own wind. The emotional tension is pure, unadulterated terror, mixed with a desperate, crumbling hope. Human presence is defined by chaos and fleeting heroism. Mayor John R. Sherwood is on the streets, his voice raw from shouting orders that no one can hear over the conflagration. Firefighters, volunteers with a single inadequate steam pumper, are helpless against the storm. Their hoses suck air from the depleted river channels. Citizens become a frantic river of refugees, dragging trunks, pushing handcarts piled with salvaged goods, their faces streaked with soot and despair. Others stand paralyzed on the bluffs, watching the heart of their dreams turn to ash and skeletal burning beams. The technology of the age, the telegraph, the railroad, is useless against this primal force. The only tools now are buckets, wet blankets, and raw courage. And then a decision is made, not in a council chamber, but in the streets, born of collective desperation. With the fire raging out of control, the only way to save what little might remain is to fight fire with explosion. Dynamic teams, men from the hard rock mines, move through the apocalyptic scene. Their faces are grim, their calculations brutal. They identify key buildings still in the fire's path, charge them, and blow them apart, creating firebreaks with concussive force. The sound of the detonations competes with the fire's roar. It is a gamble of annihilation to prevent total annihilation. By midnight, the fire burns itself out, having consumed 32 blocks of the city's core. The consequences are absolute, tangible, and devastating in the dawn's cold light. Over 1,000 buildings are gone. The commercial district is a smoldering plain of chimneys and rubble. The losses are in the millions, a catastrophic blow. Yet as the sun rises on August 5th through the pall of smoke, something else becomes visible. The falls still roar. The railroad tracks, though scorched, are intact. And the people are still here. The true climax is not the destruction, but the reaction to it. Even as embers glow, the talk is not of leaving, but of rebuilding. James Glover, his own holdings in ruins, stands amid the wreckage and declares, "We will build a city of brick and stone." The decision is instantaneous and unanimous. There is no period of mourning, only mobilization. Within days, architects are drawing plans. Within a week, trains are bringing in brick, stone, and steel from the east. The very technology that failed to stop the fire, the railroad, now becomes the lifeline for rebirth. The city government passes strict new building codes, masonry construction, wider streets. The social and cultural tension of the boom years evaporates, replaced by a unified, almost fanatical purpose. The Spokane Spirit is born not in triumph, but in ashes. The fire did not destroy the city's future. It burned away its provisional, fragile past. The city that rose from the river had been tested by water and iron. Now forged in fire, it would be rebuilt not as a wooden frontier town, but as a permanent, impervious metropolis of the Inland Empire. May 4th, 1974. The Washington Water Power Building, downtown Spokane, Washington. The sound is no longer the roar of unrestrained water, or the clang of spike malls, or the crackle of a consuming fire. It is the low, steady hum of fluorescent lights and the rustle of architectural blueprints unfurled on vast drafting tables. The air is climate-controlled, carrying the scent of ink and coffee. Out the window, the view is of a mature, confident downtown of stone and brick, anchored by the majestic Gothic clock tower of the Davenport Hotel. But the focus in this room is not on preserving the past. It is on a radical, surgical plan for the future. The 1974 World's Fair, officially known as Expo 74, the International Exposition on the Environment. This moment is the culmination of a century's journey and the beginning of Spokane's modern identity. The long-term impact of the fire was a city built to last, but by the mid-20th century, it faced a different malaise. The railroad economy had plateaued. The historic downtown, once the proud symbol of the Spokane Spirit, was decaying, bypassed by suburban malls and freeways. The mighty river, the city's reason for being, was hidden behind industrial warehouses and rail yards, its banks littered, its waters neglected. The social and cultural tension now was between stagnation and reinvention. The human presence in this planning room is a new generation of civic leaders, like King Cole, the fair's visionary president. They are not speculators like Glover, but pragmatists with a bold streak. Their tools are environmental impact statements, federal grant applications, and avant-garde design concepts. They see the city's greatest liability, the polluted, industrialized riverfront, and envision its transformation into its greatest asset, a world stage park. The political battle is fierce. Skeptics call it a fantasy, a bankrupting folly for a city of Spokane's size. Proponents argue it is the only way to shock the city back into vitality, to reclaim its birthright from the falls. Expo 74 becomes Spokane's second great rebuilding. As the fairgrounds rise on Havermale and Cannon Islands, the very heart of the river, the project does more than construct pavilions. It performs open-heart surgery on the city's geography. Railways and industrial blight are ripped out. The river is cleaned, revealed, and celebrated. The United States, the Soviet Union, Canada, and Japan build structures here, their flags fluttering in the river breeze. When the gates open, Expo 74 is a stunning success, drawing over 5 million visitors. Its legacy is physical, the beautiful riverfront park that remains with its iconic U.S. Pavilion gondola ride and lush grounds. But its deeper impact is psychological. It proved a smaller city could think and act on a global scale. It reconnected Spokane to its elemental source. The Spokane River, no longer just an industrial engine, but a centerpiece for community and beauty. Yet this forward march carries the quiet weight of all that has been paved over, both literally and metaphorically. The long-term impact of the 19th century is a city that thrives, but on land whose original stewards were displaced. The Spokane tribe, whose ancestors fished the falls, now governs the reservation to the north, pursuing economic sovereignty through casinos and enterprises, a complex legacy of resilience and loss. The Spokane spirit of boosterism and rebirth is celebrated in bronze statues of Glover and in the preserved grandeur of the Davenport. But the full history, The roar of the falls that meant one thing to the Spokane and another to the millwright echoes in the background, a necessary chord in the city's song. Today, Spokane stands as a city that has repeatedly decided its own fate, choosing to harness the falls, to court the railroad, to rebuild in stone, to reinvent its core. It is a place where history is not a static record, but a layering of audacious choices etched in geography. From the thunderous power of the river to the quiet hum of a modern convention center, the narrative is continuous. It is the story of a city built by force of will upon a force of nature, forever shaped by the water that courses through its heart, and the indomitable, complicated spirit of the people who channeled it.